Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 145th episode of the Truth Island podcast. There is no time like the present is probably one of the most important tenets of Buddhism and is something that every meditation practitioner hopes to achieve. It is also said that nothing is real but the present, as the past is never how we remember it, and the future will never turn out quite how we imagine it to. In fact, both the past and future, for the most part, remain inaccessible to us to manipulate, as it is only the present moment that remains in the palm of our hands to shape and control. And yet, despite this age old wisdom, so much of our modern world demands that we think and prepare for the future. We are told that we need to earn certain degrees so that we will be able to land jobs, or put aside a certain amount from each of our paycheck so that we will have something to retire on. While those who plan for the future may have a leg up on those who simply enjoy the pleasures of the moment, a lot of this planning and thinking of future options can cause us a great deal of stress and anxiety, especially when things don't pan out as we intended. Joining me to help make the most of the present moment, I am once again joined by Kenny. Kenny, are you the type of man that sets some time each week to carve out goals and plan for the future? Or do you just take life as it comes?
I think it's a little bit of both, Aaron. We, my wife and I have a certain time of the week or month when we plan plan our usually just our budgeting and stuff like that for the month. But there's some things that we plan I just like the budgets and um, I think I think and then maybe our schedules if we have what's it called meetings with clients or friends and so forth. But beyond that, I think we're mostly go with the flow. Yeah, I think go with the flow is actually my preference, actually.
Okay, so I want to like break this apart because I like what you said that it is a balance. And like I think if there's one truth that we've discovered here on Truth Island, everything is a balance, right? Like absolutes just don't seem to fit in this very confusing world of ours. So
Mm.
let's talk about that balance a little bit. I would say that I ruminated and planned for the future a lot more in my 20s, I got to get through school, I got to get through this, I got to get good performance reviews at work. And society would actually pat me on the shoulder and say, atta boy there, Aaron, planning for that future, taking the necessary steps, and like I said, society applauds that kind of behavior. We kind of, it's interesting because I remember we talked once before that like the villains of movies always have like these grand plans that they spent years and years making in order to control the world, and then the protagonist just rushes in there with no plan and just blows up the Death Star or whatever. So right, like that's kind of, so society on one hand will pat you on the back and say, way to go, that's being a responsible adult. But I did notice in terms of my mood and how I felt, there's a lot of fear and anxiousness that kind of, when you're ruminating too much on the future and preparing a little bit too much for it, you start getting really, really anxious because there's a million things that can go wrong, like just a million things that are out of your control that could just go wrong. And it robs you of the present moment to some degree. Like when you're over preparing for the future, you're unable to kind of just sit back and enjoy the small little beauties and pleasures of the present. So I'm wondering what advice you would have to kind of like figure out that right balance.
Well, man, so the first thing I think of is people have to just stop feeling bad about wanting to live in the present. I know it sounds very hippie and it sounds very, new age, and a lot of people are they think it's irresponsible. And often we make philosophical associations that have nothing to do with whether a thing is true or not. It's more about, is it cool? Is it not cool? How do I look when I think about? Well, it's true. Well, it's kind of if it's true that the present is actually more important. So should I say the past and future are non-existent, which I can get behind because really I can't touch the past and I certainly can't touch the future. I mean, they're conceptually in existence, but not actually in existence. So I think that first of all is you have to get rid of the feeling guilty that you don't that it seems as though you're not being as responsible as you ought to be. And here's the thing about, and don't tell people what you're doing. Don't tell people that, hey, I'm trying to live in the present. Because, well, first of all, what business is it of theirs? Usually we want to tell people about how we're trying to live in the present so that they can give us a, especially to those who we know will give us a credit, like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, man. What is that about? Do you meditate, bro? That's dope, man. Wow, you're such a cool guy. And
Right. Yeah. And
yeah,
it's also, it does, like, people can use that in like a condescending, like, "Psh, I don't care about where I live," right? And it kind of
yeah,
has that egocentric, like what I call the egocentric minimalist, right? Who he's our guy with the flip phone, right? Like, he's like, I don't care about
yeah.
your iPhone 12. I've got my flip phone, right? And there is a little bit of condescension in that kind of attitude towards life. I agree.
Exactly. It's like, bro, I asked you the time. I didn't ask you whether you had a flip phone or not. And so the people, so these guys. So that I would say, don't tell anybody. Just try to make it your own private little practice. So for this for two reasons. So that you're not the anxiety of others knowing that this is what you do is not is not overwhelming. Second is so that you don't screw yourself over by cheapening this understanding. Because when you try to use an understanding, something you understand, something philosophically beneficial for popularity, it cheapens it, and it's very interesting. It's kind of like the the money that your parents give you rather than the money you earn. They say that the money you earn is the money that that you try to save and you're actually pretty careful with. But the money that is actually given to you or stolen is not really in any way cared for. So this idea, until it's yours, until it's something that is naturally a part of you, something that you do without thought, something that you do without even wanting to do it, is until it's that much yours, I would say keep it to yourself.
Wow. Let me just, it's really amazing because my girlfriend just told me something like that just yesterday, like pretty much like
No
very
kidding.
similar, right? You guys are on the same wavelength here. And I'm starting to see the wisdom in that. And there's also another thing that I'm starting to see is that when you tell people something about your lifestyle, it gives them the opportunity to kind of point out contradictions within your own lifestyle. Whereas in actuality, you don't owe anyone an explanation for anything. Because if you, taking your example, if you go around and say, I live in the present moment, I live in the present moment, but then you quietly set up like an IRA or some kind of like retirement thing, well, then all your friends can stab you and be like, well, hey a minute, Mr. Hippie, you said that you lived in the present, but I noticed you have this like investment thing going on here. Whereas if you just don't tell anyone what it is that you believe and you just act upon what feels right, well, then you'll never get caught up in the cobweb of contradiction.
Yeah, one of the things that I know and love about human beings is that we love to give each other crap. We love to poke holes and jest with one another. Some out of really good humor, others out of just malicious intent. But at the end of the day, it's we like doing it, and so people are going to take every opportunity they can, especially if they're close friends or people who really just secretly don't like you, take every shot, every chance they can to poke poke a little hole in your world.
I think it's a little bit healthy though. I think it's a little bit of an exercise, and it goes back to that. It goes back up to this guy, right? Who, like, let's say he only works out his chest and arms, but he never works out his legs, and he doesn't do any kind of martial arts. He looks in the mirror and he looks at his big bicep and says, "Yeah, my ideology is invincible." Right? We have these folks that live in their own bubble, and they look in the mirror and they see their ideology, they see whatever their belief system is, and they think they're invincible. But sometimes your friends, when they're poking holes in your ideology, they're actually doing you a service service because they're pointing out some of the weaknesses or some of the blind spots in your ideology. But hey, man, you didn't work out your legs, or hey, man, is it always wise to live in the present moment when this or that is happening? And they're doing you a service, right? Because if those friends just allow you to live in your hot air balloon and allow you to soar up, you're never going to get better, and you're never going to improve, and you're never going to grow, right? So if you don't have friends pointing out your weaknesses, you just remain oblivious to them, and eventually a train is going to come heading your way, and you're not going to know how to deal with it because no one ever pointed out the holes in the way that you were living.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of that's what friendship is. That's at least part of what friendship is for. Um, so in the sense of, I mean, even your enemies, when they poke holes, I mean, though they can be very, unkind, there is some benefit. I remember someone telling me recently that, it doesn't, the question is not if what they said was hurtful or not. The question is it true? So I think you're right. There is a place for that, and I think that's what a good friend wouldn't let you walk into. At least he's not going to let you walk into a pit of snakes without without giving you a shout out or a warning. And so absolutely, yeah, there's a very helpful part in that. Yeah. And it does make us it does make us wiser, it does make us stronger, it does make us more understanding and more good humored.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly helps. Like when I think when an enemy points out your weakness, you do become defensive. So it's always good to have really trusted friends that are speaking to you. And because when they're pointing out your
Yeah.
weaknesses, they're doing it out of that love and out of that care. They're not pointing out those weaknesses to bring you down, to defeat you. They're doing it so that you can quietly go back and refortify yourself and rebuild yourself in a
Mm.
stronger way. Okay, I want to bring up a situation. I think I talked about this with someone else, but I'm curious to get your take on it. And that's kind of how the pandemic changed the way that we think about the future. And the example I think is something that actually happened in my neighborhood in
Yes.
Queens, New York. There are many, many, many small business owners, where I live, who, and if you run a small business, the level of sacrifice it takes is just immense. Many of these people, they borrow from friends, from family, from the bank. They take out these loans from the bank at high interest rates. And the pandemic just decimated, like just completely destroyed a lot of these small
Yes.
businesses. Now, a lot of these people on paper, like if you look at them on paper, they seem like highly responsible people that really planned for the future. They budgeted, they allocated, and yet something like the pandemic just came along and wiped that clean, just completely destroyed years and years and years of hard work and careful
Yeah.
planning. So I think, I mean, for me personally, like, I'm not saying that you should not put any consideration towards the future. We just discussed why it's a balance. I do think though, like I do have a tough time reconciling in my head. Like, imagine you have a small business owner and the pandemic wiped out his
Mm.
business. And let's say that small business owner is 125 grand in the
Mhm.
hole right now. He's in debt, right? Whereas there's some lazy dude sitting on his couch playing video games all day and he's like $0 in debt. Maybe he doesn't have like a really high income, but he has zero debt. And there's something about that is just like mind blowing, right? Like there's something that just is absolutely mind blowing, that the careful grasshopper who planned and saved and worked diligently might be 125 grand in the hole right now, whereas the lazy dude who just played video games has less debt than that dude. How do we make sense of this in this crazy? It's so crazy I can't make sense of it.
Well, it is crazy, but it's actually part of the way the world just works, in the sense of, yeah, usually, I mean, there's usually the person who does make the plans ends up, well, doing much better than the person who didn't. But every now and then, every now and then, that's just not the case. It's just not the case. I mean, people get lucky, people get unlucky. I mean, I was just watching a video recently on YouTube by the channel's name, but it's a brilliant guy. It talks about how, he was asking what's more important, luck or hard work. He found out that, okay, people always say that hard work is incredibly important, and they're right. But luck is just as important, if not significantly more important than hard work. Because you can work in this world, a lot of people are working. They're working their butts off. You're working their butts off for your spot, for that position that you're trying to get to. And there are people who are far more qualified than you are, who just simply were never born in the same country, let alone the right period, let alone never had them how you say um, the awareness of that specific opening and so forth. And you find that there's a lot of luck that plays into our everyday lives and especially our professional lives. We like to think that the elites, as they call themselves, made it there because they were absolutely superb at what they did. Sure, some of them did. Some of them were just lucky or knew the right people and so forth. And so you find that faith does not, I mean, faith, not faith, but faith does not always, favor the well prepared. But sometimes fate just, has a seizure and says, I'm going to pick some guy on a couch playing video games.
There's some truth in this, because I think that if you're comparing yourself with millionaires and billionaires, there's no way you're not going to get bummed out at this world, right? And I think on one hand, it's tough, because on one hand, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. And then on the other hand, you have to be brutally honest with this world. So the part where you have to be brutally honest with yourself is you say to yourself, where was I born? Who were my parents? What were the opportunities that were afforded to me? And did I make the most of them? And that's a difficult conversation for everyone to have, right? Everyone wants to make it seem like there are obstacles where there are no obstacles, right? And it takes a certain degree of humility to kind of have that conversation with yourself, because you want to, some people create invisible barriers all around them because they don't want to take ownership for their own failures or their own lack of motivation.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're born on one of like the far corners of the earth and you're comparing yourself to Jeff Bezos or something, I mean, there's no way there's no way that you're not looking up in the stars and being like, come on, man, like, really, like I'm supposed to go from here to over there, like that's all on me, whereas somebody else was born a lot closer to the top, like they were born a lot closer to the summit of the mountain, right? And like, I do think that there is some comfort that one could take, some serenity that one could take in being like, hey, I was kind of just born here in the middle of the mountain or on the bottom of the mountain, and it looks like I'm going to be here for a while, so I might as well kind of take it easy a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's no need to freak out. And usually the thoughts, the terrifying thoughts about the future and where it's taking us scare the living daylights out of us. But if we could if we could learn, I mean, it's, for different people it's a different story. So it's like, though the Buddhists actually, it is a staple of Buddhism, it's also a staple in Christianity, in the sense of I do believe it was Christ that said something along the lines of do not worry about tomorrow, what you will eat, what you will drink, something along the lines of today has enough worries for itself. So the point is simply, I mean, this idea has been, at least has been reiterated by many great minds and many how you say religious leaders. The idea is simply that worrying about the future is not in any way helpful, is not in any way, how you say, especially, so I mean, you find that stress really does kill. Stress is a very dangerous phenomenon that hurts your mind and your body. Hurts, can you imagine it? It's just worrying kills you. Can you imagine?
And it is extremely draining because you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Yeah.
On your shoulders. And you find that, you're like me, 29, looking 45. What in tarnation is going on? But the point is simply, for those, it's different for people, and especially it depends on, and I think it often, not all the time, it often depends on their religious, dispositions, because people who don't believe, in a God per se, find it hard to do that, because the present is simply a means to get to the future, and the future, because it's not, nobody's looking after them. Nobody. Parents, sure, parents are there, but you turn 18, and who gives a crap about you anymore? You're on your own, really. Parents only want to give you advice. They don't want to give you money anymore. There's a difference, you know. And you find that, a lot of the needs, and a lot of the problems and anxieties you feel are often about money, and about status, about profession, and marriage. And these are things, all of these things, a lot of these things are tied to money. And so you find it gets really hard, very complicated for people with a, actually, naturalistic worldview to figure out, okay, why shouldn't I worry? My life is literally today, not going in any way the way I see it, the way I want it to go, the way I planned or envisioned it would go. Why shouldn't I worry? Well, I can't give you an answer besides the fact that you'll suffer twice. It will kill you.
Yes.
Um,
So like
so
I think like another example of this is, a lot of millennials were told, if you go to college, and you work hard or whatever, you'll get like a good job or whatever, right?
yeah,
So all of that was predicated on future thought. Now, that maybe there are some people who went to college and studied theater or philosophy or things that they truly loved, and they enjoyed every step of the moment,
yeah,
right? So there's people who went to college and studied whatever the hell it is that they wanted, and they enjoyed every moment of that
yeah.
journey. But there's, I'm sure, a lot of quote unquote practical folk who studied something that perhaps they never had a passion or a zest
Or
for,
cared for, yeah.
uh, or cared for, in the hopes of like, well, if I do this, tomorrow is going to bring, I'm going to get a better tomorrow. I'm going to have a better future. And for a lot of millennials, that just simply has not come true. It just simply has not. They've graduated and found out, oh, wait a minute, there are no jobs, or the jobs that are available pay significantly less than what I thought. And meanwhile, I have this $80,000 in student debt and
Mm.
so forth. So that's kind of like an example where the person who went to school or did not go to school and was just enjoying that present moment and just reading and doing whatever it is that they liked might actually be happier than the person who's like, okay, let me study this thing because all my friends are telling me to study this thing, and I think it's going to be super practical and pay off in the future when I graduate from here. So who's right, who's wrong? It's a really tough call to make, but I feel like as of late, maybe things were different in the 70s or 80s or 90s. Maybe there was more guarantees and more stability, and things of that sort. But I think as of late, a lot of institutions, or a lot of things that we place trust in, seem to be turning over upside down.
Yeah, because they always will. It's always the case. It's always the case. They always will. There is no institution that at some point that will not crumble at some point. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. So basically, the job of every institution is to simply amass as much money as they can before they crumble, which is exactly what they try to do. But they never believe they're going to crumble because they believe they're going to last forever. But that's not true. Every institution will crumble. But another thing about this is the idea that, first of all, people really, they like this idea. You tell, I don't, you'll be hard pressed to find someone you say, hey, listen, don't worry about, the future, live in the present, take it easy, just live day by day and so forth. There's some people like, man, that makes sense. Like it makes sense to us when we hear it. Like we want to do it. We really want to, but we don't. No, we can't. We can, but we don't. Because it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're like, you just listen to a great song and you get up, maybe you're at your computer, get up to go get some water or something, and you come back and you think, what the hell was what? I know I just listened to that song, but I don't remember the name. I don't even remember the tune. But I still kind of know it was a good song, but I just don't know what the hell.
Oh yeah. I can't memorize lyrics to save the life in me, so I definitely know that feeling.
That's how we behave often when it comes to these kinds of things. We hear it, we like it, we want to hold on to it, we don't hold on to it, and what ends up happening is we still end up worrying about the future, we still end up worrying about tomorrow and so forth. Personally, for me, man, I think that this is actually a very, very important concept and very important truth because, and not to the point of, personally, and I don't know anybody who does this, but not to the point of saying casting all care to the wind. I'm talking about every single thing. That makes no sense to me. But in the sense of knowing that you do what you can do. So the problem is not simply worrying about the future. It's worrying about the things in the future you cannot change, influence, control, which is a lot of it. There's some things you can try to influence, but then there's fate, there's chance. The chance and times happen to every single one of us. And so you find that even the things you can control can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye, like the person who took out the loans. They could control that. They could take out loans, and they did, and they got screwed over. And it had nothing to do with it wasn't like a laziness or irresponsibility on their part, but it was is it irresponsibility or lack of sorry, lack of responsibility on their part, but it was just chance, luck or lack of luck. And we like to believe that there's no such thing in this world. We call it luck, where we call it luck, but we find that it's a real thing. You walked past an alley, nothing happened to you. The second person walked past an alley and got a bullet in the brain. It happens. And there's no rhyme or reason to why it wasn't you and it was the second person. So I think that we can plan for the things that we can control, but we also have to know that the things that we can control are also up in the air in a sense, because there's no guarantee. And so, sure, putting savings accounts, investing, making a savings account, sure, investing, sure, making your plans and who you're going to see, sure, but
Yes, and what you just, I mean, I actually think that I heard a really strong argument for living in the present in what you just said about, um, one guy goes to an alley, walks out fine, the other guy walks into that same alley and leaves with a bullet in his head, and now he's dead, right? And
yes,
suppose that dude who got a bullet in the head, let's say his last thoughts were the fact that he lost 15 grand in the stock market. Okay, let's just say that guy is in the alley and his last thoughts are like, oh, I can't believe I listened to these hedge funds or whatever. Boom, done. And then like if we were like the guy has the bullet in the head, but then we rewind his life for the past 15 years, he's been just worried about the stock market, worried about his IRA, worried about that retirement, worried. It's like if you look at the past 15 years of that man's life, he was completely robbed of the things that might have actually brought joy into his world.
right.
And then just thinking of now we can't. Now I agree with you, we can't live our life as if tomorrow I'm going to get a bullet in the head and I won't be here anymore, right? Because we just can't do that, right? There's too
Just
much.
yeah,
We
practically.
just can't. But at the same time, I think it's always good to pause and say to ourselves, if I die tomorrow or if I died today, what did I spend the past 10 or 15 years thinking about or concentrating on? I think that's an equally important question to be asking oneself.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that guy, it's a tragic case. And but here's the thing: a lot of people are living like that. A lot of people living like that all the time. And you know what's funny? I've had a chance to talk to a lot of old people, and I don't know that any of them would say, you need to worry more.
Yes,
You know what
yes.
I didn't do? I didn't worry enough. You gotta worry to a kid. Listen, this life is crazy. You gotta worry day and night. Okay, that's really how to handle this. And it's
Man,
it's
you know what's actually funny?
back to
When
me.
I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, and this is what I actually find extremely wonderful about elderly people. People
Yeah,
think, oh, elderly people, they're elderly people are a valuable asset in our society,
yeah.
right?
At
And
least
we need
most
to
of
go
them.
back to the Confucian way of saying that. And I'm going to tell you why.
Why is that?
The most The most fearful people that I've ever met are people in their 20s. They are so afraid. They're afraid about their future. They're afraid about being judged about others. They're afraid, oh my God, my boss is going to think this of me. They're fearful. You can smell the fear because they have their whole life ahead of them, right? If you're in
Yeah.
your 20s, you have your whole life ahead of you and you're so afraid of every misstep. Like, oh my God, I didn't get that job. Now my life is going in a completely different direction. It's all gonna, right? They're living. You can smell the fear emanating from them.
Yeah.
That's why when you ever have a job and you work with people in their 20s, they always throw each other under the bus. They always throw each other under the bus because they're afraid. They're like, I can't lose this job. He did it, right? That's how the people in their 20s operate because they're living in constant fear. Elderly people, though, they know that most of their life has already been written and so it's already over and they're kind of just waiting to die. And that actually I feel like that liberates them to live in the present because the fact that there's not that much that they can do to kind of change their station or change what has happened or change anything else allows them to actually see the present for what it actually is, right? Because like they don't need to worry about what direction their life is going in because it's practically over. And it's a really immensely like liberated state to be in because you actually have the ability to live your life with no fear because you know that your life is pretty much over. So whatever you say or do is not going to have that much of an impact. Might as well sit on a park bench and kind of enjoy the wonderful clouds and sunshine.
Yes. I mean, I believe that. I believe that absolutely. But I also think that, it's really hard for people in their 20s to get this. They're just the sheer reason, just the explanation. Because, these days we often think that what we feel is incredibly important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one to say it's not, doesn't matter. I'm not, but I'm not, I don't believe that it should be, how you say, the force or the initial force by which we live our life. And when the anxiety or the fear of the future, and it's rampant, it's very depressed nation, especially amongst the youth, are very anxious people. And it's, the the anxiety is ridiculous.
Yes.
The amount of people who are worried about, and it's usually about the future, and it's usually about how they're perceived by others and so forth. So the
Yes.
future and perception of others.
You know what's incredible, man? And I'm just thinking about this now, listening to you speak.
Hmm.
It's like the more future you have ahead of you, the more anxiety that creates. Like you would actually think that being young would bring you comfort. You actually think that youth would bring you comfort of like, man, I could do that in my 30s. I could do that in my 40s. I could do that in my 50s. You would think that youth would bring you comfort, but it's actually the opposite. It's like the closer you get to death, the better you feel. It's like you feel better almost when it's like, oh, I have much less years to worry about. Like it's going to end soon. And like, it's actually it's real. Isn't that how life is funny like that? That like the more years you have to worry about, the more you feel that weight on your shoulders. But then the less years you have in front of you, the better you feel because you know that death is just going to sweep over you and put you to that nice, wondrous sleep in a way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those who are older have done a lot of things that they wanted to do. They accomplished A lot of them have accomplished their goals. But even if they haven't accomplished their goals, they've had goals accomplished for them by the world. In the sense of, even if that's not what they planned on doing, they did something. You know what I mean? You may have been a carpenter or an accountant all your life, but and that may not be what you wanted to do, but you did it and you did it successfully, you know. And so they really have good reasons to not be. They're just done. They're waiting for the end to come, and you've had a lot of time to process death, at least hopefully. Had a lot of time to think about it. Had a lot of time to accept it. Had a lot of time to not to not regret it as much, you know. But the young lads have a lot to regret. Many of them haven't reached attained what they wanted to attain. Many of them aren't married. Many of them have kids but haven't seen their kids grow up. Many of them haven't gone to those countries they wanted to go to. It's just to them the fear of all those things, the fear of missing out, the fear of not being around to experience those things. It's crippling. So yes, I do believe that the further away we are from those years, and we're certain, we deep down inside, we're certain that we can die. We're certain of that. We don't believe we're immortal. Sure, we behave like that on camera. Like you see these kids doing backflips into 2-inch pools. It's like, yeah, you think you just do it, and but sometimes showing up to your friends is far more important than it's far more important than our fears. God knows I've put
Yeah.
my aside to do something stupid. So the point is simply that we don't want to not live. We want to live, and we want to accomplish those things that we want to accomplish. And then once we do, we think we'll be ready for death. But I think as we go on with life, kind of process death little by little throughout our life.
Yes, yes. I think I definitely think that death integration, because death is one of those topics that we kind of avoid like the plague, but I actually think that death integration is a very positive thing because I think and I don't think anyone can fully accept it fully, right? No one, like it's really hard to fully process it, but the closer you get to processing it, I feel like the more freedom, the more wiggle room that you have to kind of negotiate this space. Now there's a second thing that I think is plaguing our young people
What's that?
that is quite particular to this generation, and that is the abundance of choice. Like we have in terms of career, in terms of who you marry, there's a lot of choice. And
Yeah.
if there's a lot of choice, there's going to be a lot of regret, right? Because if you were born in the Middle Ages and you were like, okay, my dad is a peasant and he's a farmer, I'm going to be a peasant, and I'm a farmer. There's only 10 women who are the same age as me living in my town. It looks like only one of them is going to be the one that I marry. There's not that much choice, and there's not that much to get worried about, and there's not much anxiety to be had because you don't have a choice. It's like your father was a peasant farmer, you're going to be a peasant farmer. No need to worry about it. That's just the way it's going to be. And there is something that there is something that's quite liberating about that because it allows you to enjoy the present moment even more because let's just say, for example, you're living in the 21st century and you're an accountant. Well, then you can always say, oh, what if I decide to become an engineer, or what if I decide to become an actor, or what if you have all of these multitude of options of like what you just said, missing out. You have the multitude of options that's weighing down on your shoulders at every single moment, saying, well, what if I did this, what if I did that? Whereas if you were in the Middle Ages, it's like you don't need to worry about any of that. You're going to be doing this no matter what it is that you think. And on one hand, it does allow you to appreciate that sunshine a heck of a lot more because you don't have to worry about what else you could be doing because you really didn't have much of a choice to begin with.
I agree with that. The problem of choices, and it is often a problem, is that to those who have no place, no ground to stand on, choices are very terrifying. Now, for a person who has the right head on your shoulders, a mind that's mature and has understanding, a mind that has understanding, choice is not in any way a hindrance. It's actually it's a benefit, because not now you have a chance to well pick amongst many things, and even knowing fully well that you can only pick one, you'll take your time to pick the right one, at least the right one for you. um, but for those who don't have the same understanding, who are incredibly anxious people, choices are not good, because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it's a hard situation to be in, but it's one of those things we have to train ourselves to understand that this is the world we're living in. We have to train ourselves to to kind of accept that we're going to have a lot of choices. I mean, you go to Domino's and there's a lot of choices. You know what I mean? I mean, how many ways can you make pizza? But you can. And so and let alone the choices you have to make in everyday life. Not every At least not everyday life, all throughout your whole life, where you will live, what job will you take? College will you go to? Um, will you will you marry the girl or will she marry him? And, do you do you like do you like coffee or not? Whatever. It can get overwhelming. It can get overwhelming. Yeah.
And this is why I hate shopping malls. I don't know if I told you this or someone.
Oh, no kidding.
I hate the shopping mall because there's too much. There's an abundance of choice there, and whatever pair of jeans, whatever shirt you pick, you're always in the back. Well, maybe I should have gone with that other one. Maybe that one was the. It's like right, and then like I actually think that the more money you have, the worse it gets because now you're like, well, I could buy all of these, right? And it's like but whereas if you go back to the 1930s or something, it's like, okay, my local Salvation Army only has this. I guess I'm just gonna have to make do with it. You don't have that weight of that anxiety of like having to worry about, oh, did I pick the right color or did I pick the right thing? Now, since there's no going back, right? Like I do believe in the forward march of progress, and we can't go back to the Middle Ages. We can't go back to the 1930s. We're going to have to live in this world of eBay and Amazon and shopping malls and choice. I think maybe the only thing that we can really do though is coming to embrace and accept the choices that we make and just telling ourselves that it is the right thing or it was meant to be this way. And I think maybe that's the missing part in our evolution of where you have, let's say you get accepted into 10 colleges or whatever it is. You choose one, and no matter what happens at that college that you choose, maybe it was a terrible experience, maybe it was a good experience, or somewhere in between, you're able to kind of just say to yourself, well, good, bad, or indifferent, it was meant to be this way. How do you feel about that?
Well, you can say it if you believe it. If you don't believe it, then absolutely do not say it. Because if you say it and you don't believe it, you're lying to yourself. And that's a very interesting place for human beings to be. And that causes all kinds of, madness. So if you do believe that, in fact, it was meant to be, implying that there was some, how do I say this? Implying that there's some either deity or some reason is, reason is mind, reason is intelligence. So deity of some sorts behind it,
Yes.
whether the fates or the gods, yeah, sure. If it was meant to be, you can say that if you believe that's what's going on, sure. But if you don't believe it, you're talking nonsense because it's not that it was meant to be. There is no meant to be if there is no orchestration of if all this is if we're living in a cold, dead, silent world, and the universe says nothing but low hums through space, then no, it wasn't meant to be. You made a choice, and you had to live with your choice, and that's where that can be terrifying. That's very terrifying. And so, but it's the truth. At least it's the truth according to how you see the world. There's certain times where something is true, even if something is not true, it's still true. In the sense of you may think that your friend had given you a side eye because he was upset with you, and you registered that as, oh, he's upset with me. Someone asks you the next day, says, how are you and John doing? He says, oh, I don't know why, but John's a bit upset with me. Now that's true. It's true. That's what you think. It's true. It's true in the sense of your own perceptions of the world. But you find out later that when you speak to John, he had some sort of dust in his eye and he was trying to get it out. And you find out, my goodness, it wasn't true. So it was true to you because you believed it. You believed it in the sense of you reasonably and honestly believed it. It wasn't based on your relationship with John. It was a reasonable thing to believe. But you find out that there was an actual objective thing happening outside of your subjective, thing. So the idea simply is, yes, if you believe it to be true, that there is no God, there is no deity, there is no intelligence, there is nothing beyond this human experience, then you cannot say that. It would be dishonest.
Okay, I hear you, and I think that's a good clarification. I'm going to refine what I said earlier, and tell me what you think about it.
Mm,
Okay, let's go to our situation where this guy has 10 colleges, and he selects one, and he ends up at a college that he really, really, really hates.
okay.
Just absolutely hates it there, hates every minute, right?
Yeah.
And when you have an absence of choice, you have no choice but to accept that it was meant to be. And here's how. Suppose that guy goes to that college and he really, really hates it. And let's say he tries to transfer. Let's just say he tries to transfer to another college and it's just not possible. He just, for whatever reason, he can't transfer to another college. He has to stay at the one that he's at.
Mm,
I think that the only reasonable thing to say in that circumstance is that it was meant to be. Perhaps maybe a divine force is forcing me to stay here and maybe suffer a little bit and be a little bit uncomfortable. And that's okay. That's meant to be. Now, if that person has the option of transferring, right? Let's just say they talk to their guidance counselor or whatever, and they're able to transfer. Well, then maybe it's meant to go from one place to the next because you had that freedom of choice. You have that freedom to kind of manipulate your situation and go somewhere else, right? So I think that when people say it's meant to be, they say that when there are no other choices, and that kind of brings serenity, right? If you have other options, like if that guy is at that college and he has the option to transfer to another college, but he says to himself, no, 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 I am meant to suffer here. Oh, woe is me. I am meant to suffer here. I will not transfer. I will bear, I will suffer here. Well, no, sir, you have the option to transfer and you have the option to go somewhere else. You do have options.
yeah.
But I think when people say it's meant to be, it's when all other options are pretty much closed off.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think that's true. The only thing is that, it's not everybody that can say meant to be. It's still the same thing with the because meant implies some sort of guidance. While for him who has no guidance, it's just what happened. You ask the person, it's along the lines of, so why are you here? Just what happened. I can't leave. It's what's happened. It's what's happening. There is no reason behind it. There's no greater purpose behind it. No guiding behind it. It was a choice that I made that I cannot get out of. Um, and it, and so I think there are two types of people. It's people who can say meant to be, and people who cannot say that honestly, at least, and say something else.
I mean, like I said, everyone's entitled. I don't judge anyone. Like, everyone's entitled to live life the way that they feel most comfortable, right? Like life is a business, but I'm that cool boss who says business casual, dress how you want. Haha, oh, you came in pajamas, right? Like, come to life however you want to be dressed. You want to come in a business suit? Awesome. You want to come into work in pajamas? That's totally cool.
Yeah.
I find that the meant to be is extremely helpful for me, at least. And again, this is me wearing my pajamas or wearing what it is that I like to wear to work, right? And the reason I say the meant to be is so helpful is because I have been thrusted into situations where I've not been able to make heads or tail as to why it was so bad, why I was suffering there, why did I suffer for so long, right? I can't make anything logical out of it.
Hmm.
I say to myself, if it was meant to be, then perhaps there was a certain level of maturity, perhaps there was a certain level of humility. I think that when we suffer a lot, it really humbles the soul, and it does so in a very positive way, right?
It
Because
does.
if you've met, like, let's just say you meet one of these like trust fund kids or whatever, right? It's like you can hear when someone has come from a very privileged background, you can hear that sense of entitlement just flowing from that sense of grandiosity, that sense of like entitlement flowing smoothly from their lips.
Mhm.
And the tiniest little thing goes wrong, like, I didn't ask for whipped cream in my mocha latte, right? Like, and they flip out, right? And you can hear that. Whereas that suffering kind of cultivates the soul. You know what I mean? It kind of cleanses that soul and removes
Yeah.
that inclination of entitlement and those inclinations of like, like, well, I should be able to control everything left and right. Whereas sometimes that suffering is meant to be because it's making you into a stronger person in some way. And that's the
Yeah.
only thing that, now that doesn't mean that you suffer unnecessarily. If there's an eject button, press the damn eject button, right? Like that eject button is there for a reason. Press the button and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I
But
must
I
suffer.
must suffer, right? There's no virtue in just needlessly suffering, right?
No,
But at the same time,
there's
I think a lot of us are thrusted into situations where we're in circumstances that are beyond our control, and
yeah.
that process of suffering is a smoothing out of the soul.
Boy, I think so too. I think that nothing makes us more relatably human than suffering. It's one of the things that we all experience, whether rich or poor, whether black, white, or Asian. We all suffer, and it makes us. It counts us the hell down, pulls us off of our little thrones that we build for ourselves.
So I think that I think we're going to close out soon. I think I'm going to give you my final thoughts, and you can give me a yes or
Give me
no as to
yours.
what you think. Okay, final thoughts on this present moment, and thank you, man. Like I would never have come up with these final thoughts without you. So thank you. Um, okay, when times are really good and we have a plenty, like lots of options in front of us, we're in that shopping mall, times are good, the savings account is looking pretty high, you have all these job offers, you're on your LinkedIn, you got millions of job
My
offers, everything is
goodness,
good.
buddy,
Yeah,
that's
it's
great.
time. It's Yeah, it's good. Life is you're riding high. Maybe it's not. It's actually not the moment to be necessarily too stuck in like you should be perhaps focused a little bit about taking agency over your life, choosing wisely, choosing
Mm.
correctly, thinking about the future because you've been gifted. You've been gifted all of these different options, and you owe it to yourself to really take those options seriously and choose the option that will be best for you because you've been gifted with a plentitude of wonderful options. Choose what's best for you and take that time and plan for your future accordingly. However, if you're ever thrown into the depths of hell and there are no options, maybe that's the moment where you start kind of enjoying the present moment and being like, I'm stuck here in this prison, but and I have no other options. I'm going to enjoy it. So it's kind of interesting because we're always thinking that we should live in the present when times are good, but maybe living in the present is best when we're completely out of options. How does that sound to you as final thoughts?
Okay, I think that's I would say I think that the idea of living in the present, living a bit in, not, I don't know if it's totally, but I would, but living in the not living, but planning for the future when things are going well, that's actually not a bad idea. I think it's a pretty good idea. And I think that living in the present, so I would say yes, but I would say this, that it's important to live so in the present, in when things are going well in the present, um, it's super important that you enjoy it. People make a lot of money and have no idea how to enjoy it. Like they really don't know how to enjoy their money. They do things, don't get me wrong, they go to movies, they buy things, but their souls are so, they don't know how to enjoy things, you know? Um, so I think it's important to people to learn how to enjoy the good things that they have. For those who can give thanks, let them give thanks. For those who can't, well, let them just enjoy it and be a helpful hand to other people.
I
Now,
Go ahead.
now when it comes to suffering, I think that in both places, enjoying when things going well and things going bad, living in the present is just super helpful. It's very helpful because that's not just for the experience, but it changes you into a certain kind of person. I think it changes you into the kind of person who is strong, a strong-willed person, strong-minded person, because you're not tossed back and forth by the circumstances, by either your good circumstance or your bad circumstance, the promise of tomorrow's failure, and or the accusations of yesterday's embarrassments. They don't come hunting, and if they do come hunting, you don't give a crap because your mind has been focused. Like you've been doing this, let's just say you've been doing this for many years, and it's no longer even a thing. You don't spend a quarter of a second entertaining any of those thoughts. I think that's all the time, but to some degrees, like for me, it's like 80% 80% presence and 80% is, or should I say even, let's say 90% is about focusing right now on the present. And 10% is about dealing with what you need to deal with, what you can deal with about the future. Yet at the same time, knowing fully well that all that could fall apart by your death today, some unforeseen circumstance tomorrow, and so forth.
Wow, I think that's an incredible addition. I'm going to revise my thought based on what you just said. I'm going to revise my thoughts again. Just one last. I want to get this right, man.
Let me hear it.
Okay, I'm going to revise it. So both when times are good and times are bad, live in the present, like because when times are good, you do want to enjoy that goodness, right? You want to enjoy some fun at TGI Fridays with your pals, right? Like, and that's important. You need to enjoy that, right?
Yeah.
Live in the present both when times are good or bad, but when times are good, you are also living in the present by making choices for your future. How does that sound?
Okay, I can see that. I like that. That's dope.
All right, we did it together, man. Team effort, excellent. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for making my present moment so good today.
Oh, thank you. No worries, my good man. Thank you too, Aaron.
This concludes the 145th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.